London, that ever-glittering serpent of gossip and grandeur, had coiled itself tightly around one question that season. Who would the Duke of Ravenshire choose? "It is I, Lady Whistledown, ever watchful, ever writing, and quite incapable of silence when love and ruin share a ballroom." And this, my listeners, is one tale even I could not have invented. A story so drenched in pride, scandal, and poetic justice that London itself still whispers it over tea. For that glittering serpent of gossip and grandeur, our beloved city, had coiled itself tightly around one question that season. Who would the Duke of Ravenshire choose? Every salon, every supper table, every whisper behind a painted fan carried the same delicious speculation. The Duke, after all, was the crown jewel of England's bachelor elite. Heir to an ancient title, richer than half the royal treasury, and more devastatingly handsome than any poet deserved to describe. He was, in short, the kind of man mothers schemed for and daughters dreamed of. But those who truly knew him, and I count myself among that privileged few who see what others do not, understood that His Grace of Ravenshire did not dream at all. He calculated, he conquered, he controlled. He was not a man moved by romance but by reputation. And yet, fate, as you shall soon learn, delights in humbling the proud. The season's grandest ball had been declared in his honor, an event so dazzling that London's chandeliers themselves seemed to tremble with envy. Every eligible lady within 50 miles descended upon Ravenshire Palace as though entering the gates of paradise. Jewels blazed, laughter chimed, orchestras swelled with triumphant expectation. And at the very center of it all, upon a raised dais draped in gold and crimson, sat the Duke himself, not as a host, but as a monarch holding court. He was dressed in black velvet, his silver cufflinks catching the candlelight like twin shards of ice. His expression, cool and unreadable, told the story long before words did. He did not wish to be there. Indeed, I have it on excellent authority that the Duke of Ravenshire loathed these matrimonial exhibitions. He found them vulgar, a parade of ambition disguised as affection. To him, love was a performance performed by fools. Marriage, merely the paperwork of social expectation. But his mother, the formidable Dowager Duchess, had issued her decree some months prior, and no man, not even this one, truly escaped the will of his mother. "A man with your power must appear responsible, my son," she had told him in tones that could bend steel. "A wife will make the ton respect you more. Power grows best when cloaked in propriety." Ah, listeners, such words have launched more unfortunate marriages than Cupid's own arrows. And yet, the Duke had obeyed. He had agreed to host this spectacle, this dreadful ceremony of selection, where London's fairest debutantes would be paraded before him like jewels upon a merchant's tray. His only condition? That he, and he alone, would decide their worth. Cruel? Perhaps. But cruelty is often the armor of men who have known loss. Rumor holds that once, years ago, he had loved someone. Not a lady of title, but a painter's daughter whose wit and laughter had set his heart ablaze. Their union had been forbidden, scandalous even, and when tragedy struck, when she died in mysterious whispered circumstances, something in him had turned to frost. From that day forth, he swore never again to be ruled by affection. He would rule only himself. Thus the Duke who sat upon that dais was no longer a man, but a fortress. And each lady who entered the ballroom that night found herself measured, weighed, and, inevitably, dismissed. I observed from my customary corner, quill in hand and eyes sharp as any hawk's. The air was thick with perfume, nerves, and desperation. Some girls trembled so fiercely I feared their jewels would shake loose. Others attempted coquettish smiles which faltered beneath the Duke's glacial stare. "Too nervous," he murmured of one, "too affected," of another, "too eager," of a third. With every rejection, the orchestra's tune faltered a little more, and the murmur of scandal grew louder. London had come expecting romance. Instead, they witnessed public humiliation delivered with aristocratic precision. I recall one trembling girl fleeing the hall in tears after being dismissed for the crime of blinking too much. The mothers fanned themselves furiously, calculating which of their daughters yet stood a chance. Even the chandeliers seemed to watch in silent pity. And yet, beneath the Duke's cold amusement, there lingered something else. A hollowness, perhaps. A man who wounds others merely to prove he cannot be wounded himself. As the night stretched toward midnight, even the boldest debutantes hesitated at the threshold. The Duke leaned back, his glass of wine untouched, his patience fraying. If he could have dismissed the entire ballroom at once, he would have. He did not believe in destiny. He did not believe in love. He believed in control, and tonight control was the only thing he possessed. Still, one could not ignore the irony. A man so obsessed with mastery, yet a prisoner to his own grief. "If I must marry," he had once told a confidant, "then I shall choose no one. I would sooner live alone than share my name with a stranger." That vow, my listeners, was the spark that set London aflame. Every gossip column, every drawing room, every whisper in the pews turned his defiance into legend. The Duke who will choose no bride. It was scandal. It was arrogance. It was delicious. And yet, there is something dangerous about daring fate so boldly. Fate is not a thing one commands. It is a thing that listens. Even now, as the Duke sat amidst his glittering court of would-be brides, unaware that somewhere across the city, a woman dressed in modest satin was fastening the last pearl at her throat, his fate was already moving toward him, not with fanfare or prophecy, but with quiet inevitability. For love, true love, seldom arrives with trumpets. It comes like dawn, unnoticed at first, until one turns and finds the whole world illuminated. I imagine that, had anyone told the Duke of Ravenshire that night that his heart would soon tremble, he would have laughed. He was untouchable, after all, a sovereign in solitude, a man carved from winter itself. But if there is one rule London should have learned by now, it is this: the higher a man builds his walls, the sweeter the scandal when they crumble. And crumble they shall. Across the city, far from gilded chandeliers and diamond laughter, another kind of light flickered. Not the golden shimmer of nobility, but the pale, practical glow of a single lamp burning in a modest townhouse on Brook Street. It was here, dear listeners, that Lady Evelyn Hartwell sat before a mirror, while her mother and sister fluttered about her like frantic sparrows preparing a reluctant dove for flight. Pins, pearls, powder. Each weapon in the endless war for social survival was brought to bear. Yet for all their efforts, Evelyn's reflection refused to transform into the kind of woman the ton worshipped. Her beauty was not the loud, commanding sort that made ballrooms hush. It was quiet, thoughtful, the kind that only revealed itself when one had the patience to look twice. And patience, as we all know, is a luxury society rarely affords women of dwindling means. Her mother, Lady Hartwell, once celebrated for her wit and now sharpened by worry, adjusted a strand of pearls at Evelyn's throat with trembling hands. "You must go, Evelyn," she said, voice brittle as porcelain. "Do you understand what this means? If the Duke chooses you, our family's fortune is restored. You could save us." Evelyn's father, a man whose silence had grown heavier with every unpaid debt, merely adjusted his spectacles and stared into the dying fire. There are defeats too vast for words, and his was among them. Evelyn did not look away from her reflection. Her pale blue gown shimmered faintly in the lamplight. Borrowed silk, a decade out of fashion, altered by her own hands. Her mother's voice rose again, cracking with hope and fear. "You are clever, child. Use it. Smile when he speaks to you. Be charming. Be what he wants." The words fell like stones into still water. Evelyn's eyes, however, remained calm. "And what if he wants nothing, Mama? What if all he desires is to humiliate every girl who tries?" The older woman froze, scandalized by the impertinence, terrified by the truth. "Then you must bear it gracefully," she whispered. We have no other choice. Ah, listeners, there it is. That dreadful phrase that has built more cages than love ever could. No other choice. London dresses it in lace. But make no mistake, desperation is the true fabric of society. Evelyn turned away from the mirror and crossed to the window, where the city stretched beneath a pale dawn. Smoke rose from chimneys, carriages rumbled over cobblestone, and in the distance, the clock of St. James struck 6. A new day, a new fate. And she, a woman with more sense than fortune, was expected to sell her freedom in exchange for her family's survival. She had never met the Duke of Ravenshire, though she had heard the stories. Cruel, arrogant, beautiful, a man who had once broken a woman's heart and had since made it his pastime to break the world's. It was said that no lady could melt him. Evelyn had no intention of trying. As her maid entered with a cloak, Evelyn allowed herself one small private thought. Let this be over quickly. Her mother, mistaking the quiet for submission, sighed with something like relief. You're doing the right thing, my love. Think of your sisters. Evelyn did. 2 younger girls asleep in the next room, their futures dangling from her courage. For them, she would face this spectacle. For them, she would bow before the Duke and pray her humiliation bought them time. The carriage ride to Ravenshire Palace with her mother was long, gray, and silent. The city receded into fog, the air thick with the scent of wet cobblestone and crushed roses, remnants of last night's revelry still lingering in the streets. Through the glass, Evelyn glimpsed the palace gates rising like judgment itself. Gilded iron crested with the Ravenshire emblem, a black raven clutching a crown. A fitting symbol for a man who believed emotion a weakness. As her carriage rolled through, she exhaled slowly, steeling herself against whatever awaited. Inside the grand hall, golden mirrors stretched endlessly. Nobles murmured like restless ghosts. Evelyn's name was called, and thus began the longest walk of her life. From her hidden corner behind a column, Lady Whistledown observed with delight. Ah, listeners, I whispered into the silence of my own quill. Society adores a desperate girl, but beware the one who enters a palace not to win, but to survive. Evelyn's steps were steady, her chin lifted. She neither simpered nor curtsied with exaggerated grace. She was not competing for admiration. She was enduring it. The Duke, half reclined in his golden chair, turned his head with the faintest flicker of interest. Perhaps it was curiosity. Perhaps boredom. His gaze swept over her like a knife through silk. Sharp, detached, dismissive. Evelyn just sat down quietly with her mother and observed. The ballroom of Ravenshire Palace that evening could have shamed Olympus itself. Gold-framed mirrors multiplied the light of 1,000 candles until the very air shimmered. The scent of roses and ambition mingled in the air like perfume and smoke, and the orchestra played a waltz so languid it seemed designed to draw out every heartbeat of expectation. Ladies stood in line, breathing shallowly behind their fans. Mothers whispered reminders of posture and smile. Every rustle of silk carried the same silent plea, "Choose me." At the far end of this theater of nerves sat the Duke himself, a dark figure upon a gilded chair, every inch a sovereign of disdain. He leaned back, long fingers drumming idly against the armrest, eyes half-lidded as though this entire affair were an inconvenience designed for his irritation. He did not smile. He did not even seem to see the trembling young women arrayed before him. To the Duke of Ravenshire, this evening was not a celebration of romance. It was a performance he had been forced to endure. And as your ever-watchful narrator, I confess, no tragedy in London has ever been so exquisitely staged. A baron's daughter was announced, aglowing with youth and terror. She curtsied so deeply her diamond necklace nearly brushed the floor. Lady Margaret Wren, your grace. The Duke inclined his head. Barely. He surveyed her as a man might study a portrait he did not intend to purchase. Too timid, he said softly. The girl paled. I beg your pardon? You tremble. It does not suit you. He turned his gaze aside. The orchestra faltered. The girl's mother gasped. A murmur rippled through the crowd, part pity, part thrill. London, you see, adores a cruelty that is not directed at itself. Next came another, the Earl of Strathmore's youngest daughter, a beauty so symmetrical it was almost tiresome. She smiled with trained precision. My lord, she began, voice bright as crystal. My family. Too rehearsed, he interrupted. A blush rose, her eyes filled with tears. I only wished to— You've wished too much, he said. That will be all. The poor girl fled before her tears reached the marble. Two more followed, one for being too tall, another for her perfume too sweet. By the 15th rejection, even the chandeliers seemed to sway with discomfort. By the 20th, the whispers grew bold. He won't choose anyone. He enjoys this. Cruel creature. The Duke heard every word and smiled inwardly. He had not smiled for pleasure in years, but power? Power was always sweet. And yet, dear listeners, power is a fickle companion. It flatters, but it does not fill. As I watched him, my quill trembling between laughter and pity, I wondered whether he knew how hollow he looked. Surrounded by gold and praise, he resembled a man already buried beneath it. At last, the steward's voice rose again. Lady Evelyn Hartwell. Ah, yes, her. The modest dove who had arrived without fanfare, whose gown was borrowed and whose courage was her only ornament. She stepped into the light, calm as dawn after tempest. No painted blush, no exaggerated curtsy. Simply stillness, that rarest of virtues in a world addicted to performance. The Duke's gaze, bored beyond redemption, lifted briefly. For the first time that evening, his fingers stopped drumming. Evelyn's mother, standing at the edge of the crowd, clutched her rosary until the pearls bit her skin. The other ladies watched with morbid fascination. Another lamb to the slaughter. The steward cleared his throat. Lady Evelyn Hartwell, daughter of Viscount Hartwell. A pause followed. The Duke studied her. Her composure, her silence, the faint defiance in the line of her jaw. All of it unsettled him. Too still, he murmured. Pardon? She asked softly. A woman so silent hides too much. Perhaps, she said, her voice steady. I have simply learned when silence serves better than speech. A ripple moved through the room, half gasp, half admiration. The Duke leaned forward ever so slightly. Is that so? It is, Your Grace. He considered her for one long, measuring heartbeat. Every other woman that evening had sought his approval, worshipped his name, trembled under his gaze. But this one, this soft-spoken creature with eyes like tempered glass, stood as though she had already survived worse men. Perhaps she had. Not suitable, he said finally. The words, by now, were ritual. The crowd exhaled as if they had all been holding their breath, expecting the same tears and curtsy that always followed. But Evelyn only inclined her head, the faintest ghost of a smile touching her lips. I accept your rejection, Your Grace. A silence like thunder filled the ballroom. Even the violins stilled. The Duke blinked once. You accept it? Of course, she said. It was never a gift I asked for. Evelyn straightened. I wish you a pleasant evening, she added, and turned to leave. For the first time that evening, the Duke's composure fractured. So slightly one might have missed it. His glass froze halfway to his lips. A muscle ticked in his jaw. For the first time in his glittering career of cruelty, the Duke of Ravenshire was left speechless. Lady Whistledown's quill hovered midair. Now here, finally, was a story worth ink. She does not want him, I murmured. How fascinating. For in a world built on ambition, there is no greater scandal than indifference. Her skirts whispered across the marble, soft and unhurried, a sound that somehow struck louder than any slap. Each step she took away from him seemed to pull the air out of the room. Mothers gawked. Young ladies whispered. Even the Dowager Duchess lowered her fan in disbelief. Evelyn did not glance back as she crossed the ballroom. Each step away from him was a step toward herself, a quiet rebellion no one yet understood. Behind her, whispers erupted. Who does she think she is? She'll regret this insolence. She should have begged. But she did not. She never begged for anything she did not desire. And the Duke, whose pride had never been refused before, found the silence far more intoxicating than tears. I, Lady Whistledown, watched through narrowed eyes and felt my quill dance across the page of destiny itself. And thus, London's coldest heart cracked, not from love, but from disbelief. For the first time in his gilded reign, the Duke of Ravenshire had been dismissed. He should have been amused. He should have laughed at her audacity. But laughter did not come. Instead, something far more dangerous stirred. Curiosity. Evelyn passed towards the towering doors without a backward glance. Her mother rushed forward, frantic. What did you say to him? Nothing that matters, Evelyn replied, and everything that does. The Duke remained motionless as he watched her. The atmosphere had changed. Something invisible, electric, hung in the air. The weight of pride wounded for the first time. His steward approached. Shall I continue, Your Grace? No. A single word, but it cut through the music. The steward froze. No more names tonight, the Duke said. The ceremony is over. He rose from his seat, tall and terrible, his expression unreadable. And if anyone had dared meet his gaze, they would have seen it. Not anger, not humiliation, but the bewildered spark of a man who had been seen too clearly for comfort. For the first time, the Duke of Ravenshire found himself wondering, not about beauty or bloodline or duty, but about a woman who wanted nothing from him. He blinked once, twice, and then something inside him, something long asleep, jolted awake. Who does she think she is? The thought tore through him before reason could intervene. Why did she reject me? He hadn't realized the absurdity of the question until it echoed in his skull. He had dismissed dozens of women tonight, yet one woman's indifference stung more than all their tears combined. No one says no to me. That, dear listeners, was the moment the empire cracked. Not visibly, not yet. But a fissure had begun, thin and unstoppable. For the Duke, rejection was an art he practiced. To be its victim was inconceivable. He did not know her heart. He did not even know why her words echoed like a challenge in the silence of his mind. But he knew this. The game had changed. His voice, raw, thunderous, unrestrained, filled the room unexpectedly. You go nowhere! The words crashed against the walls, reverberating through crystal and bone. Gasps erupted from the crowd. A fan clattered to the floor. The orchestra froze mid-note, bows suspended in air. Evelyn turned, startled but composed, her eyes meeting his across the glittering expanse. He stood rigid on the dais, every trace of refinement stripped away. Not a duke now, but a man undone. You heard me, he said again, quieter this time, but far more dangerous. You go nowhere. The hall erupted in whispers. He stopped her. Did you hear that? By heaven, the Duke has lost his wits. And there, amid the glitter and shock, the balance of power shifted. Not with a touch, but with a command that sounded far too much like desperation. When pride commands and reason flees, scandal is born. And London, my listeners, adores nothing more than the birth of a scandal. The Duke of Ravenshire's words, "You go nowhere," still trembled in the air as the ballroom froze around him. Evelyn Hartwell, her hand poised on the gilded door handle, turned slowly to face the man who had just sealed both their fates. The orchestra halted. Gasps erupted like sparks from a struck match. The Tun had witnessed arrogance before, but never this. A duke rising before all of London to command a woman to stay. He descended the dais, each step deliberate, his composure barely stitched together. His voice, when it came, was low but deadly certain. Lady Evelyn Hartwell will remain at Ravenshire Palace until I say otherwise. The words echoed through marble and mirrors as scandal took its first glorious breath. The Dowager Duchess rose sharply, the whisper of her silk gown loud enough to hush the murmurs. "Ravenshire," she hissed, "for heaven's sake, what are you doing?" "What I choose," he said coolly. "You were meant to select a bride, not abduct one." Ah, there it was, the distinction every whispering soul in the room understood. London wanted the Duke married, yes, but married properly, with papers, announcements, and pomp. To detain a young lady without explanation, that was not romance. It was madness. The Dowager's eyes darted toward Evelyn. "You humiliate the girl. Do you not see what you've done?" "On the contrary," he replied, "I've merely ensured her safety." "Safety?" she repeated, incredulous. "In the palace of a man who has just scandalized her in front of half the peerage?" Her fan snapped shut like a verdict. "Fix this, Ravenshire, or the entire season will burn you alive." But the Duke was already looking at Evelyn again, and his mother's words became background noise to the pounding of his pulse. "You heard me, Lady Evelyn," he said quietly. "You will stay." Evelyn's voice was calm, her dignity untouchable. "If that is your wish, Your Grace." "It is. Then I shall obey, though not because you command it." Her tone carried neither bitterness nor submission. It was something far more dangerous: self-possession. The Tun had never seen anything like it. That night, Ravenshire Palace became a cage gilded in silence. Evelyn was escorted by the housekeeper to a guest chamber in the East Wing, a room meant for visiting nobility, not captives of the Duke's temper. From her window, she could see the rain tracing paths down the glass, the gardens below drowning in fog. She could have cried if she had been the weeping sort, but she was not. Instead, she whispered to herself, "Let him think he's won." Meanwhile, in the study below, the Dowager Duchess unleashed the full force of maternal diplomacy. "Ravenshire," she began, her voice dangerously calm, "your arrogance will ruin us all." He poured himself a drink, unwilling to meet her gaze. "I have done nothing improper." "Improper?" She laughed without humor. "You've commanded a young woman to remain in your house without guardianship, announcement, or chaperone. You've given every gossip in London the impression she is your mistress." "She is no such thing," he snapped. "Then make it clear. And feed the wolves more blood? No, mother. Let them think what they will. It amuses me." "Amuses you?" she repeated, staring as if she no longer recognized her own son. "Do you even know what that word means anymore?" He turned toward the fire. "Perhaps not." "Ah, but I do, my listeners. Amusement, as any writer of hearts will tell you, is merely fascination in denial, and fascination is the first step toward ruin." The following morning, Evelyn appeared at breakfast in a gown of pale gray, the color of restraint. The Duke was already there, reading correspondence he clearly wasn't absorbing. He glanced up as she entered. "Lady Evelyn." "Your Grace." Neither bowed, neither smiled. "I trust you slept well." "Perfectly, thank you. Though I confess, I was not used to sleeping under lock and key." A muscle twitched in his jaw. "You mistake concern for imprisonment." "Do I?" she asked softly. "Then I shall consider myself protected." Her tone was polite enough to be venom. Over the following days, his curiosity became its own torment. He tested her composure like a scientist prodding at something he could not define. He sent for her to join him at meals, where he spoke little and watched much. He assigned her trivial tasks, selecting books for the library, hosting his mother's tea, offering counsel on the palace charity accounts. Anything to keep her within his sight. but she disarmed him at every turn. If he expected defiance, she answered with poise. If he expected tears, she gave silence. When he flaunted his mistresses, the same courtesans who once decorated his evenings like jewelry, Evelyn merely glanced up from her embroidery and said, "You must find such conversations exhausting." And he, to his horror, laughed. The dowager noticed first. "You are changing," she said one afternoon, standing by the window as he lingered in the hall below. "You watch her like a man afraid to blink." "She amuses me," he replied, too quickly. "No," his mother said. "She exposes you." He frowned. "To what?" "To yourself, and you've never liked what you see." He said nothing. The truth, when spoken softly, always wounds the deepest. That night, unable to rest, he wandered through the corridors until he found himself outside the east wing, outside her door. The candlelight flickered under the threshold. He heard pages turning, the quiet hum of thought. For reasons he could not explain, he did not knock. He simply stood there, hand hovering near the wood, pulse unsteady. When he finally turned away, his reflection in the glass caught him, a man who looked nothing like the untouchable Duke he had once been. London, meanwhile, was aflame. "The Duke has taken a hostage. He keeps her hidden in the palace. His mother can't control him." By morning, I had my headline ready. "The Duke who refused every woman has finally refused propriety itself for one who dared to refuse him." The scandal spread faster than fire across silk, and behind every locked door of Ravenshire, the truth grew stranger. For the woman who was meant to be a captive was slowly becoming the captor. He found her days later in the conservatory sketching by the rain-streaked window. The sight of her, hair loosened, light catching the curve of her wrist, stirred something raw and unwanted. "You draw?" he asked, when I am left alone. "Are you content here?" "Contentment is dangerous, Your Grace. It makes one forget freedom." He stepped closer. "You despise me, don't you?" She looked up. "No, I simply see you." And for the first time, he had no reply. From my desk, pen balanced above parchment, I wrote the line that sealed the week's edition. It began as captivity and became curiosity. Yet somewhere between fascination and fear, the Duke of Ravenshire discovered that chains of his own making are the hardest to break. The first storm of autumn came without warning. By dusk, the sky above Ravenshire boiled with thunder, and the gardens below dissolved beneath sheets of rain. Lightning flashed across the windows like torn silk, and the palace, that proud fortress of silence, groaned beneath the weight of wind. Within its walls, servants hurried to shutter windows and douse lamps, whispering that His Grace was in one of his tempers again. But storms, as I have often observed, are never only outside the heart. Evelyn Hartwell sat by her chamber fire, the light trembling across her book though her eyes had not moved across a line in an hour. The thunder seemed to echo the restlessness beneath her skin, the tension that had built each day since the Duke had bared his cruelty, his curiosity, and, most dangerously, his attention. Somewhere beyond the door, she could hear the rhythm of boots pacing the corridor. The Duke's, unmistakable even among dozens of servants. He had not joined her at breakfast or dinner. Instead, he'd prowled the house like a wolf trapped by his own walls. It was near midnight when her candle flickered to its end. She rose to fetch another from the hall, and paused. The corridor outside was dark, silent, empty. She hesitated only a moment before taking up her candle and stepping beyond the safety of her room. Rain hammered the windows, drafts whispered through the seams. And then, faintly, she saw it. A glow at the far end of the west wing. A door stood slightly ajar. The west wing was forbidden. She had learned that much from the servants, who crossed themselves whenever conversation wandered near it. They said the Duke never entered those rooms anymore, not since the tragedy years ago. Yet here was a door, open, its light spilling into the storm-dark corridor. Evelyn hesitated, And curiosity, that trait so dangerous in women and so irresistible in heroines, carried her forward. She entered. The room smelled of cedar and smoke. A single fire burned in the grate, throwing soft gold across shelves of books, sketches, and maps. The air felt alive with memory, like a place the world had forgotten but grief had not. At the center stood a large portrait veiled by a dark cloth, the fabric shifting slightly with each sigh of wind. She stepped closer. Her fingers had just brushed the edge of the covering when a voice broke the silence. "Don't." She turned sharply. The Duke stood in the doorway, rain-soaked, hair unbound, eyes rimmed with exhaustion. His cravat hung undone, his posture unguarded. He looked less like the cold Duke of Ravenshire and more like a man who had fought ghosts and lost. "I didn't mean to intrude," Evelyn said, breath unsteady. "Your door was open." "It never is," he replied. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. The storm raged louder beyond the walls, thunder answering thunder. Inside, there was only the flicker of the fire and the slow, deliberate echo of his boots on stone. Her gaze returned to the shrouded painting. "You keep this room locked." "Why?" He stopped before the hearth. "Because what's inside deserves to stay forgotten." "Then why not destroy it?" she asked. He stared at the covered portrait for a long moment. "Because I cannot." The silence stretched. Evelyn's candle trembled in her hand. "Who is she?" she asked softly. His voice, when it came, was low, the kind of tone that carries both devotion and despair. "She was the daughter of a painter," he said at last. "I met her when she came here to sketch the gardens. The world called it folly, a duke and a tradesman's child. But I loved her." He looked away. "Our families forbade it. We saw each other in secret until the day she fell ill. They called it fever, but the truth—" He stopped, his voice tightening. "The truth was never known. Rumor said it was poison, or punishment. All I know is that she died, and no one cared to learn how." He approached the painting. "I had her painted 2 days before she died. She wanted the world to remember her happy. I wanted to forget she ever suffered." The confession hung heavy in the air, fuller and more human than any story London had whispered. Evelyn spoke quietly. "And instead, you remembered both." He gave a hollow laugh. "Yes, every day." He sank into the chair nearest the fire, the shadows trembling across his face. "She died, and with her went whatever softness remained in me. I learned that love is nothing more than cruelty postponed." "You hate love," Evelyn said. He looked up at her, eyes sharp and wounded. "No. I hate what it turns men into. Weak, desperate, half alive." She stepped closer, the flicker of the fire catching her eyes. "Then perhaps," she said softly, "you never hated love. Only loss." He blinked. The word struck deeper than he expected. "Loss," he murmured, tasting the word. "Loss is all love ever leaves behind." "Only when you close the door before it returns," she answered. For a moment, neither spoke. The wind shrieked against the window panes, the fire hissed, and in the fragile quiet between them, something shifted. Not forgiveness, not understanding, but recognition. He rose, walked to the portrait, and with one sudden, decisive motion, pulled the cloth away. The woman stared back from the canvas. Light hair, soft smile, eyes that gleamed with laughter. A soul immortalized in color. "She's lovely," Evelyn whispered. "She was," he said. "Too lovely for this world, and far too gentle for me." Evelyn turned toward him. "You've kept her imprisoned in here, as if love itself were something shameful." He exhaled. "You think me a coward? I think you a man who punishes himself for surviving." The firelight flickered between them. He took a slow step forward. "You shouldn't be here." "Then why haven't you asked me to leave?" He said nothing. His eyes were unreadable, but the silence between them burned brighter than the fire. The thunder roared again, closer now, shaking the windows. Evelyn reached up and covered the painting once more, the cloth falling gently over the image. "Some memories," she said, "should rest, but some need air before they can die." He looked at her as though seeing her for the first time. "You speak as if you understand." "I do," she said quietly. "Grief doesn't fade. It transforms. You can bury it, but it learns to breathe through the soil." He smiled faintly, without joy. "You are wiser than I expected." "Not wise," she replied, "just tired of pretending not to feel." He turned away, pressing a hand to his forehead. "You make it sound simple." "Nothing simple ever changes us," she said. Lightning flared again, framing them in light, the ghost of his lost love on the wall, the living woman before him, the same ache painted across both scenes. And for the first time in years, the Duke did not feel alone. He spoke again, his voice raw. "You could leave tomorrow if you wished." She met his gaze. "And if I stay? Then I will not know peace again." Her breath caught. "Peace is overrated, Your Grace." A single moment of silence passed, fragile, infinite. Then she turned and left the study, closing the door softly behind her. When morning came, the storm had spent itself. The gardens glistened, new and clean, the air sweet with petrichor. The Duke did not appear at breakfast. He remained in that locked room, the fire dead, the portrait covered once more. But something in him had shifted, a thread of warmth woven through the cold. And in my morning column I wrote, "The storm outside had ended, but another had begun, within him." For love long buried had stirred, and grief, awakened, had found a new face to haunt. Dearest listeners, if there is one thing London does better than virtue, it is spectacle. And the royal masquerade at Blackwood Hall promised to be the most sinful of both. Every candle in Mayfair was lit that night, every roomer gilded in lace. Coaches rattled through the rain like thunder on wheels, delivering silks, jewels, and secrets to the grandest ballroom of the season. The air itself seemed perfumed with expectation, and at its glittering center, the one name whispered on every lip was Ravenshire. For weeks, society had wondered what became of its coldest duke and his mysterious houseguest. Whispers bloomed like violets in scandal's shadow. He's bewitched. She's trapped. They dine together in silence. He paints her at dawn. She weeps for her freedom. Ah, my listeners, how I adore the ton's imagination. And yet, not one of them guessed the truth, that pride, once wounded, is the most faithful servant of love. The Duke of Ravenshire was to appear that night, and not alone. Yes. The man who had publicly rejected every eligible lady in London now dared to escort one to the grandest ball of them all. His carriage rolled through the rain, windows fogged with silence, the tension between its occupants thicker than the November mist. Across from him sat Lady Evelyn Hartwell, veiled in silver silk and quiet courage. She did not fidget, did not glance his way. Her stillness, as ever, unmade him more than any outburst could. He adjusted his mask of black velvet and finally spoke. "You need not attend if it displeases you." Her gaze never wavered. "You command so rarely, Your Grace. I wouldn't wish to rob you of the habit." Ah, barb served on silver, the finest kind. Blackwood Hall was ablaze when they arrived. Gold chandeliers wept light across mirrors and marble, and the air shimmered with laughter, the kind that always precedes ruin. When the herald called out, "The Duke of Ravenshire and Lady Evelyn Hartwell," the music faltered, as if the orchestra itself had dropped its bow in shock. Every masked face turned. Some gasped, others sneered. And I, hidden among the gilded balconies, dipped my quill and smiled. The game had changed. He offered his arm. She accepted. Together they descended the staircase as though they had choreographed defiance itself. The Duke was a study in black and restraint, his mask sharp as judgment. Evelyn, radiant in silver, moved like calm light poured into chaos. The crowd parted as they passed, a tide yielding to two storms. "She's the one he kept locked away," hissed one duchess. "She must have ensorcelled him," whispered another. "Oh, she's doomed," sighed a third, already mourning a scandal not yet written. But Evelyn met every stare with poise, every whisper with silence. The higher London raised its glass, the lower it wished her to fall. And still, she stood unbroken. The Duke, for his part, was less composed. His gloved hand flexed against his side, his jaw tight behind the mask. He was used to controlling rooms, not being the subject of them. He watched her, how her laughter, rare and delicate, drew eyes from across the floor. How she conversed with lords who had once bowed only to him. He should have felt triumphant. Instead, he felt unsteady. Ah, yes, the beginning of downfall always feels a bit like vertigo. Then, my listeners, came the moment every scandal needs: temptation. A young viscount, handsome, charming, utterly disposable, approached Lady Evelyn with a bow and a question that turned the entire night on its axis. "May I have this dance?" The crowd froze. The Duke's lips parted, but no sound emerged. Pride gagged him, fear chained him. So Evelyn curtsied, smiled, and said the words that sentenced him. "You may." The waltz began. She moved across the floor like wind-made flesh, graceful, untouchable, alive. The Viscount's hand rested upon her waist, his smile easy, his confidence unearned. From my balcony, I could see the Duke standing utterly still, his expression unreadable beneath the mask. Yet even from that distance, I could feel it, the heat of jealousy breaking through his carefully tailored cold. He watched her turn, watched her laugh softly at something her partner said, and in that moment, I believe he would have traded every title he possessed for the right to be the man she smiled upon. When the dance ended, polite applause fluttered like moths around the chandeliers. The Viscount bowed again, clearly enchanted. Evelyn inclined her head, ready to retreat to the safety of the crowd. But fate and pride are poor listeners. The Duke crossed the ballroom in 3 swift strides, his boots striking marble like drumbeats of war. He seized her hand, not roughly, but with finality. "Your Grace," she began. He pulled her closer, the world narrowing to the space between their breaths. Masks turned, fans paused mid-flutter. The orchestra faltered again, the violins crying out like startled birds, and in the hush that followed, he spoke, not as a duke, not as a man performing power, but as one confessing surrender. "You've undone me." Ah, the gasp that followed. It rippled through the ballroom like wildfire through silk. What did he say? He's mad. No, worse. He's in love. He did not care. His voice, though low, carried the weight of truth. "I thought I could forget what it was to feel," he said, his eyes locked on hers. "Then you appeared, and every wall I built began to crack." Evelyn, pale but steady, whispered, "People are watching." "Let them," he replied. "They watched when I rejected the world. They may as well watch when I kneel before it." A tremor of emotion passed through her. Fear, wonder, something unnamed, before she drew a careful breath. "And what do you want from me now?" "Nothing," he said softly. "Only one dance." The orchestra hesitated, then, as if compelled by destiny itself, struck up a new waltz. He lifted her hand. She hesitated only a heartbeat before yielding. And so the Duke and Lady Evelyn began to dance, not as captor and captive, nor as noble and commoner, but as 2 souls who had circled each other long enough to know that escape was no longer possible. Theirs was not a polished dance. It was hesitant, searching, but it was real. When she faltered, he steadied her. When he forgot the step, she guided him back. Around them, the masked faces watched in reverent disbelief. I will confess, dear listeners, even I forgot to breathe. For in that instant, every cruel headline, every whispered judgment, every rumor that painted him as heartless, all dissolved in the light of that single dance. The Duke of Ravenshire, the man who once rejected every woman in London, had found one he could not let go. And she, quiet, unflinching Evelyn Hartwell, had done what no diamond of the season ever could. She made him human. When the final note faded, he bowed deeply, his voice steady but hoarse. "Thank you." And just like that, he turned and walked out, leaving the ballroom in stunned silence. The crowd erupted moments later, tongues and tempers alike. "He's mad for her. She's ruined. It's love. Real wretched love." Evelyn stood alone amid the storm, mask trembling in her hand. But she did not flee. She simply watched the doors through which he'd vanished, as though listening for something only her heart could hear. From my seat above, I dipped my quill into fresh ink and wrote the truth of the night. And thus the hunter became the hunted, caught not by beauty, but by indifference. Because, listeners, that is the cruel miracle of love. The more one resists, the deeper one falls. And when the mighty finally bend their knees, it is never to those who begged for their favor, but to the one who never needed it at all. If London had slept that night, it certainly woke screaming. By dawn, not a single teacup in Mayfair was safe from trembling hands. Parlors quaked with scandal, ink dripped onto breakfast linens, and every respectable mouth gorged itself upon the same forbidden delight. The Duke of Ravenshire declared himself at the masquerade. Ah, my listeners, how they tried to disguise their thrill with outrage. One dowager fainted into her marmalade. Another claimed she knew it all along. The poets called it a tragedy. The cynics called it strategy. And one rather uninspired viscount swore it was witchcraft. By noon, the phrase, "You've undone me," had been repeated so often across drawing rooms and gambling clubs that it began to sound less like confession and more like hymn. But no one, not even I, Lady Whistledown, mistress of rumor and resurrection, could have predicted what followed. For once, Ravenshire did not flee. The Duke, so long a master of avoidance, did not vanish into his estate or hide behind excuses of diplomacy. He rode home in silence beside Lady Evelyn, his mask discarded, his pride shattered yet strangely intact, like glass that has learned how to hold its cracks. The carriage groaned through the wet London streets. Rain streaked the windows, blurring the city into watercolor. Evelyn sat opposite him, her silver gown dim in the dawn light, the lace of her mask crushed in her lap. She had not spoken since they'd left the ballroom. Neither had he. For once, the silence between them was not a battle. It was something heavier, the weight of words waiting to be born. When they reached Ravenshire Palace, the servants melted away like ghosts sensing their master's unease. The Duke followed Evelyn into the marble hall and stopped her there, between the flickering sconces and the grand staircase where they had once passed as strangers. "You should despise me," he said quietly. "And yet I find I cannot bear the thought." She turned slowly, meeting his gaze. "I do not despise you," she said. "But I do not understand you." He gave a humorless laugh. "Nor I myself." He stepped closer, his voice softer now. "London will tear you apart for last night. I know this city's hunger for cruelty. I have fed it often enough. You must not stay here." Her brows drew together. "You would send me away?" "I would free you," he said. "You owe me nothing, Evelyn. Not gratitude, not forgiveness. Certainly not your presence." He hesitated, then added, so quietly I nearly missed it, "I cannot protect you from the world when I have become its weapon." Ah, listeners, the irony. The man who once commanded her to stay now begged her to go. Such is the transformation of love. It teaches tyrants to unmake their own cages. Evelyn studied him for a long moment. He looked different now. Less a duke, more a man undone by his own heart. The rain light caught the faint bruise of sleeplessness beneath his eyes. His hands, once folded in perfect poise, trembled slightly at his sides. "You wish to protect me," she said. "Yes." "Then stop deciding what that means." Her tone was not harsh, but true, and truth, my listeners, can wound more sweetly than any sword. Later that morning, gossip reached the palace before breakfast. Couriers brought letters stuffed with speculation. Society's most venomous tongues took turns sharpening their phrases. "She's bewitched him," cried one. "A manipulative temptress," swore another. "Or perhaps," murmured a third, "he's finally gone mad." The Dowager Duchess, poor woman, spent the morning pacing the drawing room, alternating between fury and despair. "What have you done, Ravenshire?" she demanded. "You've turned our family name into a stage play." "I've done nothing I regret," he replied. "You've humiliated yourself for a woman beneath you." He looked at her then, and for once his words were gentle, not cruel. "No, Mother, for the first time I've humbled myself for someone above me." By afternoon, Evelyn prepared her trunk. Rumor had already spread that she was leaving. Some said she'd been dismissed, others claimed she'd been bought off with jewels. Neither was true. She packed because leaving was the only thing she could control. Yet when she came to the window, the rain had stopped. Sunlight bled through the gray, turning the gardens into mirrors of light. For a long while, she stood there, unmoving. The Duke found her in the corridor, her cloak folded neatly over her arm. "So it's true," he said. "You're going." She nodded. London is cruel, but so is staying where one's presence is a wound. He swallowed hard. And yet, every wound I have ever borne feels smaller than the thought of you gone. She turned to face him fully then, voice trembling. "I never wanted to hurt you, Your Grace, but I will not live as your regret." He took a single step toward her. "And if I asked you to stay?" Her answer came softly, the sound of mercy disguised as defiance. "Then I would ask you why." He had no immediate reply. Pride had always filled silence before. Now he had nothing left to fill it with. After a long pause, he whispered, "Because I don't know who I am without you." It was not a declaration. It was a confession, fragile, imperfect, real. She exhaled, lowering her eyes. "You are the same man you were before. Only now you have seen what love makes of power." "And what is that?" he asked. "Small," she said, "but true." He reached into his coat and withdrew something small, the silver mask she had worn the night before. He held it out to her. "I found this in the carriage," he said. "You left it behind." "Then perhaps," she murmured, "I meant to." He hesitated, then placed it gently in her hands. "If you walk away, Evelyn, the world will remember me as the man you destroyed." She smiled faintly. "Then let them, Your Grace. The world has always loved its villains more than its martyrs." And yet, as she turned to go, something inside him broke, quietly, irrevocably. "Wait," he said, his voice rough. "Please." She stopped, her hand upon the door. "I give you your freedom," he said. "Truly, you are no longer bound to me by pride or command. But," he faltered, searching her face, "if freedom means you wish to leave, I will not stop you. If it means you wish to stay, I will not deserve it. But I will be grateful." The silence that followed was so profound even the ticking of the clock dared not intrude. Evelyn turned back slowly. Her eyes, which had seen the cruelest corners of society, were soft now, not with pity, but with understanding. "You mistake me," she said. "I was never bound, not even when you thought I was." She stepped closer until the faint scent of rain lingered between them. "I will stay, not because you command it, or because London demands it, but because I choose to. Ah, listeners, how strange that the simplest words can feel like rebellion. The Duke's breath trembled, his eyes closing as though the very sound of her choice steadied him. He did not touch her, not yet, but in that moment restraint became reverence. And for once, the palace did not feel like a cage. It felt like surrender. That evening, I wrote at my desk by candlelight, the quill dancing between amusement and awe. Outside, the streets were wild with gossip, but within Ravenshire's walls, quiet had returned. Not the silence of distance, but the peace of understanding. I penned the line that will linger longer than scandal ever could. What is freedom, if not the power to stay when one could leave? London, that glittering empire of scandal, does not forgive softness easily. By the following week, Ravenshire's name had become the most delicious curse on every aristocratic tongue. They said he had been bewitched, undone, ensnared by a woman's cunning. They said she had bewitched him with silence, with eyes that saw too much, with hands that never trembled. One paper even dared to print a line that made me, Lady Whistledown, laugh aloud at my desk. The Duke of Ravenshire is possessed, and the demon wears silver. Oh, my listeners, how cruelly the world mocks what it cannot comprehend. But love, as ever, is deaf to laughter. That evening, Ravenshire Palace was quiet again. Too quiet. The Duke sat alone in his study, a single candle burning low. Rain misted the window panes, and the fire's glow painted his face in gold and shadow. He had dismissed his mother, his servants, even his fears of ridicule. For the first time since that fateful masquerade, he wanted truth, not performance, not command, not pride. And she came. Evelyn entered without announcement, as though the storm itself had carried her there. She wore no jewels, no finery, only a soft blue gown, simple and unguarded. For a moment she simply stood by the fire, her eyes reflecting the same quiet ache he had tried so long to drown. He rose when he saw her. "They are calling you a witch," he said. "I know," she replied. "You do not seem surprised." "How could I be?" His voice was rough. "They must call it witchcraft, because they cannot name what I feel without damning me too." Evelyn stepped closer, her voice steady. "And what is it you feel?" He hesitated, his gaze breaking. "Fear? Of me?" "No, of what you make me remember." The words came haltingly, pulled from somewhere deep. "I once loved a woman," he said quietly. "She was light laughter, everything the world told me I could not have. When she died, I buried her and every part of myself that had dared to love her. It was easier to be cruel, safer to be alone." His hands trembled slightly. He clenched them behind his back. "And then you came. With your calm, your questions, your silence. And suddenly the walls I built began to bleed." Evelyn listened without interruption. The only sound between them was the crackle of fire, the whisper of rain. He looked up then, meeting her eyes. "They think you bewitched me, Evelyn. And perhaps you did. But if this is a spell, it is one I cast upon myself." She stepped forward, close enough for the light to reach both of them evenly. "You are not cursed, Your Grace. You are human." He gave a bitter laugh. "I have tried to forget how to be that." "You cannot heal by forgetting," she said softly. "You do not heal by refusing to feel, Your Grace. You heal by daring again." Her words struck him like thunder, not in volume, but in truth. He stared at her, as though seeing the shape of salvation for the first time. "Daring again," he repeated, tasting the phrase as though it might break his tongue. "You make it sound easy." "It isn't," she said. "It is the hardest thing you will ever do, but courage is not the absence of pain. It is loving despite it." He took a slow breath, his voice unsteady now. "And what if I fail again? What if I lose you too?" "Then you will have loved twice," she whispered. "And that will make you more alive than before." He looked at her for a long moment, The woman he had once tried to command, the one who now commanded his heart without effort. The Duke who had never begged for anything found himself on the edge of pleading for everything. "Evelyn," he said, voice trembling, "I cannot promise you peace. I cannot promise safety. Only truth. Only me, flawed, frightened, still learning how to be kind." She smiled faintly. "Then that is all I've ever wanted." The clock struck once in the distance, echoing through the quiet. He reached for her hand, not as a claim, but as a question. Her fingers met his halfway, warm and deliberate. "I used to believe love was control," he murmured. "That to command it was to master it." "And now?" she asked. "Now I know love commands me," he said, "and I obey." Evelyn's lips parted, not in surprise, but in understanding. She raised their joined hands to the light, as if studying proof of something sacred. "The world will never understand us," she said. "Then let it misunderstand," he replied. "It has never known what truth looks like." Outside, thunder rolled one last time, distant now, like an old enemy retreating. He pulled her gently closer, until her head rested against his shoulder. For a long while, neither spoke. They simply stood there, watching the fire's reflection dance in each other's eyes. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "Do you know why they fear me, Your Grace? Because they do not understand you." "No," she said softly, "because I do not need you. I choose you." That broke him more sweetly than tears ever could. He exhaled, a sound half laugh, half sob. "You shame me with mercy." "No," she said. "I free you with it." He drew back just enough to look at her, his thumb brushing the curve of her jaw. "And what if the world continues to call you witch?" "Then let them," she said simply. "A heart that can resurrect another might as well be magic." Ah, listeners, even my quill trembled at that, not because of scandal, but because of something rarer. Truth spoken plainly between equals. The firelight gilded them both in gold, and I, hidden somewhere between ink and imagination, found myself almost believing in redemption. For there it was, the miracle London never expected. The Duke of Ravenshire, once cruel and proud, bowed not before a throne, but before forgiveness. And Evelyn Hartwell, the woman they called Enchantress, became not his conquest, but his cure. When I wrote my column that night, I ended it with a question that no rumor could answer, a whisper to linger in the hearts of those who still believe love's risk is its proof. What is magic, if not the courage to feel again? It is said that London never sleeps, but I assure you, dear listeners, even the city must rest after love has outwitted it. For weeks, the Tun gossiped itself hoarse, choking on its own delight. The tale of the Duke of Ravenshire and the woman they once called bewitching became every hostess's favorite scandal, every poet's muse, every moralist's nightmare. And yet, for all their chatter, not one of them truly saw what became of the couple after the storm faded. Ravenshire Palace stood quiet in the winter sunlight, its windows no longer shuttered against the world. The snow lay soft upon its lawns, untroubled and clean, as though the house itself had drawn a deep breath after years of holding one in. Within, the Duke sat by the fire in the great hall, a letter half written upon his desk, his pen motionless. He had written it 3 times and torn it thrice. Each draft began with command and ended with apology. Evelyn found him there, as she so often did, thinking too loudly. He looked up when she entered. No titles passed between them now. She had stripped those away long ago with the ease of someone peeling off armor. "You still believe this must be grand?" she asked, nodding toward the discarded pages. He smiled faintly. "The world expects its dukes to act like dukes." "And yet," she replied, "you have already disappointed the world beautifully." He rose and crossed to her, every motion unhurried. "I thought to announce it with ceremony," he said, "to reclaim some shred of dignity before the Tun." "And what stopped you?" He reached for her hand, his thumb tracing slow circles against her wrist. "Peace," he said simply. "I realized I wanted peace, not spectacle." "Then you've already found it," she said. Outside, bells from a distant parish began to toll, soft and distant. The sound settled through the quiet like grace itself. They married that morning, quietly, deliberately, without audience or applause. No crowds, no orchestras, no trumpets. Only 2 signatures, 2 witnesses, and the scent of snow through the chapel windows. The dowager wept softly, not from pride or disappointment, but relief, the kind that comes when love, at last, looks like mercy. The Duke did not wear his title that day. He was simply a man with trembling hands. And Evelyn, no longer a lady bound by circumstance, wore no jewels, no veil, no pretense, only a silver clasp at her throat and calm in her eyes. When he knelt to offer her his vow, there was no arrogance left in him, only awe. "I once rejected every woman," he said quietly, "because I feared none could see me. You saw me, and forgave what you found." Evelyn's reply was a whisper only he could hear. "You were never hard to see, Your Grace, only hard to reach." When the vows were spoken, there was no applause, no fanfare, just silence, the kind that humbles even the proudest hearts. He pressed a kiss to her hand and rose, not as conqueror, but as equal. They walked out of the chapel together into a morning washed pale by sunlight. The city that had condemned them was already busy inventing new sins to discuss. But for once, neither of them cared. London could keep its headlines. They had found something quieter than fame and fiercer than power, peace. And so I, Lady Whistledown, close my quill upon a tale that began with arrogance and ended with grace. A duke who once scorned affection now kneels before it. A woman once bound by duty now reigns by choice. And somewhere beyond gossip's reach, love, that most unruly of teachers, has claimed its final victory. I leave you with this, my listeners. Not all obedience is submission, and not all defiance is rebellion. Sometimes it is the quiet dignity of a woman forced by duty, who still chooses grace, that brings even the proudest of men to their knees. And if that is not witchcraft, then perhaps it is something rarer: forgiveness.